Hello everyone, this is Rev Brad. Every year around this time of year, my mind and heart start to get geared up for another season of serving as a volunteer chaplain in soccer. And this time of year is filled with a lot of prayer and recollection, thinking back to the past and looking forward to the future. Today on the pod, I want to talk a bit about this idea of blessing everything as a prayer posture for chaplains, especially chaplains in sport and especially soccer. Now, there are some nuances to the phrase, but the idea of blessing everything has become part of the theological tool belt that I wear and tends to be a posture even in my day-to-day, from the training day to the off day to match day and everywhere in between. Now, today's podcast might be a bit more directed to the audience of folks that also serve as chaplains or sports ministry people in a particular space, but the truth is sometimes when we preach to the choir, there's some intention that the residual will fall in the ears of some people who might benefit from hearing it as well. Also of note, we're soon to hit podcast number 300. That's a bit of a milestone, I guess. I started podcasting back in 2018, and as I went back through the numbers, I found, I did about 25% of the year, and the next year, 2019, but it was really in 2020 we started doing this weekly podcast format. So I'm really excited to kind of hit that number. And all that to say that in a few weeks, we've been working to maybe have some new music, maybe a new opening, and maybe a few other new things cropping up. Those things are all in the works, and I don't want to say too much because who knows if they'll actually happen. But for now, let's get stuck in again, and I'm going to let Richard Fleming and Marcelo Balboa open us with the call, and then we get into the subject of blessing everything and letting God guard the consequences.
Just a little off foot, thinking he's going to go far post. Not strong enough with his right hand.
Whips that one in. Far post, almost made amends, and they have. He has the hat-trick. The second in his career. The third of the night. The hat-trick hero.
Talked about you're not going to be able to sustain that kind of pressure.
To the corner. Goes towards the near post. And you're the angle, and what a goal! What a goal!
As I get set to begin my 24th season as a volunteer chaplain of the Colorado Rapids, as I said, I find myself spending a lot of time in prayer. For the athletes, for the coaches, for the staff. Some have moved on and some have just joined the club. So there's some new faces, there's some old faces you have to say goodbye to. There's also athletes around this time of year, especially in the U.S., facing retirement or career and life change. There's a season ahead for ministering through the highs and lows that all accompany the beautiful game at the professional level, and much, much more. So often this prayer-filled time often includes a bit of personal reflection and introspection. What are the resources of faith that have been drawn on in the past? What stories, what people? Where can I learn and grow? And how can I share those things with others? How can I model those things and share them with the athletes I walk alongside of, with the staff members? Those all kind of frame up this time of year for me. In all my years of serving, pastorally and as a chaplain, there's been a cadre of people whose life and work stand out to me as examples. And if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time now, you've likely heard me mention the name of Saint Ninian. Ninian from Scotland was one of the key people who helped advance Christianity throughout the British Isles. He went to Rome to study and learn. He was appointed bishop by the Pope, but by some accounts it's said that he was kind of put off by the opulence and some of the politics that had grown up around the vestiture of the papacy there in Rome. So he left Rome to return home. On his way home, though, he stopped in Tours, France. He had heard of the work of St. Martin, who was also a bishop, and what his disciples were doing and accomplishing in Tours, France. And he journeyed there to learn, what's Martin doing? What's he undertaking? In the legend of St. Ninian, it's told in the Old English language. It's really difficult to understand. But it's said that Ninian kind of found this bosom friend in Martin. And though the two of them only spent a few days together, it was really impactful for Ninian. The story goes on that Ninian, as he was leaving, asked Martin if he would give him a couple of his stone masons and they'd be allowed to return back to Scotland with him. And Ninian's credited with building Candida Casa, which means White House in Latin. And he built this sort of church in Whithorn that became a training and sending center for many of the missionaries that kind of worked throughout the British Isles. And what was unique about that place was it was a stone church building, kind of in this pivotal place that Whithorn was. And that was really rare for the church back in those days. So Ninian had this impact, and he had this effect. Now, stories of the saints of old during these time periods especially are difficult to nail down, I think, with certainty and authority. There are a lot of legends around the work that was done. Many of the stories tell of these fantastical miracles that were performed, and sometimes even the work of one person, as even a Saint Ninian, might be attributed to others who were working in and around the area at that time. Maybe they were disciples or close associates of Ninian, and sometimes it kind of gets a little convoluted with some of the stories. But I think when we wade through some of the more fascinating and legendary things, we can see some patterns and trace a certain degree of truth that I think we can associate with the saints of old. And I want to give you an example. So St. Patrick, he was known as he would move throughout Ireland and move in his ministry movements. He would, and his disciples, they would move near the villages where the people were and the people they were looking to serve. And Patrick and his disciples would go out and, kind of if they'd been rejected, they weren't quite initially accepted in the initial part, they would kind of camp outside the village. And then as the people went out to gather wood or hunt in the fields and forests while they would fish the rivers and streams, Patrick and his disciples would go along and they would work together with the people, and they would bless the people in what they were doing. So they would pray that the rivers might bring forth the fish, the fields might have a great harvest and might produce game, and that the trade amongst the other tribes would go well. And in doing so, the people of the village often were won over to the Christian message, because here was a God who was personally involved and personally cared for their lives. Well, where did Patrick learn this? Where did he learn this approach? It's known that Patrick spent some time studying under Ninian in his ministry and studying in that place, Candidicasa, where many missionaries were trained up. And so when we hear accounts that Patrick was trained, some of this work is part of the influence of Ninian, I believe. And it's known that one of Ninian's practices might be summed up in this phrase. It goes like this: bless everything and let God guard the consequences. Let me say that again. Bless everything and let God guard the consequences. In the years that I've practiced chaplaincy in and amongst soccer, this, for me, has become a learned pattern. Whether blessing elite athletes as they go out into competitive matches and endeavors, or praying for an injured player who just had an injury or is on the recovery road, or whether I'm supporting a family devastated by news of a trade or a contract release, or attempting to bring reconciliation between a coach and a technical director. As a chaplain, we often get called into these difficult spaces where we really need to try to understand, could I bless this? Can God bless this? And in that, we kind of bless everything and let God take care of the details. We let God guard the consequences, as the phrase says. So let me just tell you, it's been a tremendous gift, this piece from Patrick and from Ninian that's kind of become part of the tool of the trade that I use in my chaplaincy. See, I grew up with the sort of wrong idea that things were up to my prayers. Whether I said them, how well I said them, or other kinds of ideas, I kind of thought, man, if I don't pray using the right words, then the good thing won't happen. And so this has brought a tremendous sense of relief for me, because I realize that it's not up to me. Yes, it's up to me to represent God well and accurately and truthfully. But in terms of the outcomes, that's not necessarily up to me, because if we pray, your will be done, we don't know everything about God's will. We might understand some good things. We might see some good things in review or later on down the road, but it's really up to God. Now, don't get me wrong. I haven't just taken this phrase, bless everything and let God guard the consequences. I haven't just taken that glibly or lightheartedly, and I haven't just grabbed onto it and I bless everything I see. I wrestle with all the time this question, can we really bless everything? I remember a number of years ago during my ordination ceremony, Reverend Dr. Brad Straight presented me with this pastoral charge. And he took the text of Hosea 14:4, and it reads like this. The Lord speaking, I will heal their waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them. Now, in reading those words of the Lord, they're really directed toward the nation of Israel, and you can hear the words of a father towards his wayward children. And Reverend Straight put it to me as a straightforward pastoral challenge that I think all chaplains and pastors eventually have to wrestle with. But the charge is this: love them freely and heal their waywardness. Love them freely and heal their waywardness. There's a sense in which there's an attitude, there's a posture that I have to take that is very unique and very different. Now, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a caregiving perfectionist, but I grew up in more of a legalistic Christian tradition. And so themes of grace and love have been a growing point for me, an edge for me to learn. As I learn those things, though, and as I kind of lean into my work with as much compassion and grace and truth in these balances, as I live in and amongst the soccer community, and I'm constantly learning what it means to look for these healing and loving moments. And so as I do that, I look for the common ground. I look for the ground in the space that can be blessed. As a chaplain, we bless what we're able to. We bless all that we can see, even if it be ever so small of something. I teach a class occasionally with Baylor University's Truett Seminary, and we've talked recently about issues of athlete identity. And sometimes there's really distorted views when it comes to identity and how athletes and even Christian athletes can identify with their sport or who they are as an athlete or who they are in the game. Maybe they're a coach or have another role. Even for me as a chaplain, I oftentimes, part of my identification, as I say, I'm the volunteer chaplain with the Colorado Rapids, and that tends to get some different attention than if I just said, yeah, I'm a dad. Now, there's some unique things to those things, but as I learn and as we grow, as we bless all that we can, we see that within the athlete, within the coach or the staff member, the executive, the owner, the family member, even the fans, there's something as simple as the Imago Dei within each of those persons. And as we bless everything, we can see different things to bless: the work, the spirit of the game or play, the sharpening edge of competitive sport. You can see the way that the athlete disciplines themselves into high levels of training, and you can encourage and bless those things to be appropriately applied towards faith. And as we do these things, I see that God guards the outcomes, whether it's the outcome of the game, maybe it's the outcome of healing a sense of waywardness, a sense of distorted identity. God helps the athlete, the chaplain, the coach, overcome the misidentification and the idolatry of the sport that often rests and resides inside of us. So some of those things, those outcomes, aren't up to me. But as I'm able to bless the good and wholesome things that are within the people and within the game, we see God doing amazing things through that. When we allow God to guard the consequences, we actually submit to his sovereignty and his authority and his design. In soccer, one of the phrases that coaches and commentators will use is they'll say, don't chase the game. Don't chase the game. And I think there's a similar thought to the chaplain surrendering the outcomes. Sometimes when a chaplain, we might go chasing some sort of result. We might think, oh, it's up to me to see this person come to a saving knowledge of Jesus, or it's up to me that this person gets baptized, or it's up to me that this person who's going through a dark night of the soul or some heavy moment of grief, that I bring them out of that. That's a dangerous space to get into, and we could get really tired and frustrated chasing some of these quote-unquote results that we might want to see as a chaplain, we might want to see as a person. But the thing is that as I get into a posture of prayer, and as I'm able to bless the things that I see, bless the things that are good and wholesome, and I let God do the work through that, that's really when it comes. That's really when you see the hand of God and the glory of God happen. And so, and I think too, that helps the chaplain maintain this safe, trustworthy presence, because results aren't down to me. Did I pray the right prayer that led to the 4-0 win or the 4-0 loss? Again, if you've spent some time with me, you know that there's been some fun little banter that's gone on between other chaplains and fun little stories. But in truth, I think that all of us hold this sense of, those results aren't down to us, and God can work in as much as the 4-0 loss as the 4-0 victory. And what does He want to do through all those things? We often don't see those things in the midst of it. We see them down the road. Well, my friends, if you're listening and you're a chaplain or you're in sports ministry, I want to encourage you. We need to let go of desired outcomes. We need to let God have the consequences, have the results. We need to let Him take care of those things. And in the course of our service, we need to apply ourselves to the work we see at hand. And oftentimes, I just want to encourage us, what do we see that we can bless? What do we see that is good, that is wholesome, that is pure, that is noble, that is honorable? How can we acknowledge and bless those things and let the outcomes be guarded and guided by God? Because they'll come. They will, my friends. Well, hey, friends, thanks for listening. Blessings to you as you go about your season this year, whether you're a chaplain, whether you're an athlete, no matter who you are. I just pray God's blessing over you. Remember, bless everything and let God guard the outcomes. Let Him guard the consequences. This has been Rev Brad coming to you from the touchline.